Greetings, everybody. My name is Frank Montero, and I'm hoping that the audio sounds okay here because we're trying a couple of new systems, but I'm a partner here at the law firm of Fletcher, Heald, and Hildreth, and I'm joined by my law partner, Matt McCormick, and we're going to be presenting today the next in our series of webinars. Today's topic is going to be once again on FCC broadcast license renewals, and today we're specifically going to be focusing on the states of Alaska, Hawaii, Oregon, and Washington, because those states have their radio license renewals coming up on October 1st, and then the television license renewals for those same four states will be 1 year later in October 1st of 2022. But before we get started, I wanted to tell you a little bit about ourselves. For those of you who are new here, Fletcher, Heald, and Hildreth is a broadcasting and telecommunications law firm here in Washington, D.C. We've been practicing for over 80 years, representing broadcasters for many years, and we work with many state broadcast associations. And this webinar, as well as many other webinars that we've done, are on YouTube. So if you actually go on YouTube and you search Fletcher, Heald, and Hildreth webinars, you'll find we have a whole page on Fletcher Heald on YouTube with webinars on a variety of different subjects, from license renewals, public files, marijuana advertising, political broadcasting, intellectual property, copyright, trademark, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on, and I invite you to go and take a look. They're all about an hour to 90 minutes long, which is about how long our presentation today is going to be as well. You can also go to Calm Law blog, which is our blog, and there you can find articles and resource materials on a variety of different FCC and broadcasting related subjects, and you'll be able to find these webinars there as well, calmlawblog.com. I also want to give a shout out to the four state associations that have helped put this together and put us in touch with all of you. The Alaska Broadcasters Association, that's my dear friend Kathy Hebert. She was great as far as really initiating the thought for this webinar. And then Jamie over at the Hawaii Association of Broadcasters, Keith Shipman over at the Washington Association of Broadcasters, and then lastly, Bob Singer at the Oregon Association of Broadcasters. So again, that's Jamie Hartman at the Hawaii Association of Broadcasters. And if you're not a member of your state broadcast association, please, I urge you to do so, because these associations do fabulous work. They really provide an invaluable service to the broadcasters in your state, and I strongly urge you to become a part of their organization, because they do really fabulous work. So to get us started, the agenda today is we're going to be going through the timeline of the renewal process, the process itself. Then we're going to try to do a deep dive into the application form itself, which is called Schedule 303S. And then filed with it is an EEO program form, which is a Schedule 396. And then we're going to close by talking a little bit about local public inspection file, because especially for radio, this is the first time that your local public inspection files are online and that you're going through a renewal cycle with those licenses online, or with those files online. So it's given a whole new twist to the license renewal process, and has really sort of focused the attention on those files and keeping them in order prior to filing the applications. And we'll be talking about that more. And then some post-filing obligations that will be kicking in, including some of the public notices that have to be run. Those public notices have changed recently, so it's something that you may want to pay attention to. And then we're going to pause periodically to take questions, and then there'll be a question and answer period at the end as well. So this will give you kind of a brief feeling for what the timetable is. Again, these are the timetables for the 4 states that we're focusing on today: Alaska, Hawaii, Oregon, and Washington. If you happen to be tuning in and your stations are in a different state, you may have a different set of filing deadline. So make sure that you check that. But again, the main focus is going to be your your application filing deadline, which is going to be on October 1st. And there's a fair amount that you're going to want to do leading up to that. And again, October 1st coming up, that's for the radio renewals, okay? If you're in TV, it's going to be 1 year later. It just so happens that that in 2022, because October 1st falls on a weekend, you carry over to the following date. That's why in our footnote, you're probably wondering, why does it say October 3rd, 2022 for TV? That's why. It's because the 1st falls on a Saturday, so you carry over to the next business day. And then, but like I said, there's going to be some lead up to that, mostly focusing on getting that local public inspection file in order prior to the October 1st filing deadline, because for a lot of stations, especially for those radio stations, TV went through this during the last renewal cycle because they had their public files online a lot longer than radio has. But for radio, a lot of stations are still getting used to getting all that material in order. So now's the time to do it, because it can be a little time consuming. Then the post-filing notices, which will end about 4 weeks after the public notice that the renewal has been renewal has been filed. And then February 1 is the potential grant date. Now, you should know that your license renewal, I'm sorry, your current license has an expiration date on it. That expiration date is going to be February 1, and you're going to be wondering to yourself, there could very well be a situation where a renewal application is timely filed on October 1st, but maybe is not granted by February 1. And you're going to be in a panic, and you go, oh my God, my license is expiring, my new one hasn't been granted yet, what do I do? Rest easy. The timely filing of your renewal application tolls the expiration of the old license. So as long as you got that license renewal application timely filed on October 1st, then you don't have to worry about the old expiration date. Now, if you miss that October 1 date, then bad things start to happen. And if by some reason, and we'll get to this a little later, if you were to miss the renewal filing by February 1, then really bad things happen, because then you do have an expired license, and things will have to be remedied very quickly. So, as I mentioned just a moment ago, the filing deadlines are very important. If you miss those deadlines, you can be subject to fines. If you miss your October 1 filing deadline, you could be looking at fines of $1,500 or up. But if you were to not file the the renewal by the actual expiration date of your license, which for radio is going to be February 1 of 2022. For television, it would be, everything is 1 year later. For TV, it would be February 1, 2023. If you miss that date, well, now technically you have to go off the air because you really do have an expired license. You may have to get you're going to have to get special temporary authority just to stay on the air. And you now may be looking at FCC fines that are north of 5 figures. So to say nothing of all the other headaches that go with, you got to hire lawyers. God forbid, you don't want to do that. You're gonna have all kinds of aggravation and hassle and distractions. So, circle that October 1 date on your calendar and let's work with it.
Let me throw in here, Frank, that we see it almost every day, that the notices of apparent liability coming down for people that have missed the renewal dates. Now, normally they're low power FMs. It's the most common one we see, but we do see them every day that come along. So it does happen. But by the fact that you're here at this webinar, it indicates that you're on top of it and you're going to make sure it happens on time.
Absolutely. Now we're going to be heading toward the actual application form. For those of you who were through a renewal process, 8 years ago when this happened, you probably remember that you filed on an FCC form 303S. It's a format's a little different now in that now all the filing is done through the FCC's new LMS system, which requires an FRN. And the substance, basically the application that's online, tracks the old form 303S, but now they call it a form 2100, which is sort of like this generic form, and then they put schedule. So they're calling it the schedule 303S, but it's largely the same form that was used last time. But the important thing is, and you're going to hear us say this over and over again because we cannot overstate this. There are now, for radio, new online public file rules. Again, TV went through this 8 years ago. Those public file rules and having the online public file in order and up to date is critical because those files now can be reviewed by FCC staff from Washington or even from the comfort of their home. Because of the pandemic, they're all working from home. They can still access your public file from their living rooms, and that allows them to basically confirm whether or not your public file is in order, even though they're asking you questions about it on the actual application. So they're checking to see if your answers are correct. So getting those public files in order now, it's a real game changer as far as the focus of the renewal process. And again, it's something that all broadcasters should be working on now. Do not wait until like the last week in September to do it. Do it now, because you're going to have in some cases 8 years worth of material in there, and it has to be up to date. With the Schedule 303S, again, it's a single form for all broadcast stations. So if you're all going to be using the same form, same sections, same questions. Boosters and translators are included on the same form as the main station, and then your auxiliaries. By that I mean we mean like your microwaves, your STLs, your RPUs. Those renew automatically, so they're not actually listed on the 303S, but they're just renewed automatically. But your boosters and your translators should be included.
Let me throw in one quick thing on the auxiliaries before we move on. It's sometimes that's handled by another portion of the commission, not by the audio division. It's I believe the wireless division. And sometimes it takes them quite a while after your renewal has been granted for the auxiliaries to show up as granted. But they will be. You don't have to take separate action. You don't have to do anything differently. The one thing I will mention is if you have satellite dishes, those are on a completely different schedule, and you need to watch what the expiration dates on those are and handle those separately. Back to you, Frank.
With boosters and translators, again, you're going to want to list the call sign, facility ID, community of license. For translators and LPTVs, they basically are going to be included on the application for the main station, but only if they're in the same state, so they would have the same filing deadline, right? Same licensee, and then you use the same form. If if the translator is licensed to a different state, or is it with a different licensee, cannot use it on the same form. So again, the translator renewals are filed based on the state where the translator is licensed, not on the state of the main station being rebroadcast. Keep that in mind. The Form 303 asks for translators and LPTVs. You list the translators for the by call sign, facility ID, community and license. You certify that the translator is on the air. You will need to identify the station being rebroadcast, and you have to certify that you have written consent to rebroadcast. So make sure that you have that, because a lot of stations, they get, it's just a phone call. It's like, yeah, go ahead, no problem. You're supposed to have written consent for that. You're going to have to certify to compliance with RF exposure rules. We're going to spend a little time on the RF exposure certifications a little later. And then FM translators only need to certify compliance with the translator contour rules for fill-in translators, or those used by with an AM station. And for LPTVs only, certified to EEO compliance and the Form 396. And we're going to be talking about the Form 396 shortly as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt, who is actually going to start going through the Form 30 or the Form 303S question by question, so that you guys can familiarize with the questions being asked. Okay, Matt.
So, thank you. So one of the first issues we have is dealing with the character certification question. This you see here a snapshot of what was on the form itself, but we can talk to you a little bit about. Go ahead and change, Frank. About what's there. We have to disclose here character issues that were raised in FCC proceedings, and you don't have to do it if you've been in a case and the case was resolved in your favor maybe 20 years ago or something like that. But if it was left undecided, you have to disclose it, and it applies to any party, both the applicant itself, that's the licensee, and any party. The parties are, we'll talk about this many times, are the officers, directors, if it's an LLC, the members, and if you have a situation where it's not an owner or officer or member, but might be a management employee, then you need to talk to your FCC counsel about what you need to do about that. Like I say, the definition of party is very broad. Now, this includes any case that involves a misrepresentation, a lack of candor, abuse of commission processes, or any other issue that comes up about the truthfulness of a party. It does not cover things that are technical violations. I mean, so if you had a, you know, antenna that was in the wrong place, unless there was an aspect of that that became a question of whether you were being candid with the commission, that doesn't have to be covered with the character qualification page. So the next one we move on is a similar matter, but not exactly the same. This is non-FCC findings. This is what the question is. It's the adverse findings question. And this relates to things that have happened outside of the FCC. So if there's been a decision by a court or any agency, this could be an administrative agency, it could be any sort of judicial type body, you need to disclose if it falls into one of these categories: the antitrust or unfair competition in a mass media related industry. Discrimination of any sort, that's probably going to be the one that catches most organizations, because discrimination complaints come up and they may be adversely resolved. If you had a settlement in a discrimination case, that's different. You ought to talk to your attorney about that, about whether it has to be reported. Fraudulent statements to another government agency, and then any felony commission, any felony conviction. Now, this question pertains only to things where there was actual findings, not just an allegation that's been made, but actual findings. When we deal with the previous question about FCC related matters, character issues, those could include both findings and cases where the matter was either not resolved yet or not at all, or is just dropped. Even if it's an open case on the FCC character qualifications page, you have to disclose it. So moving into the next one is that we've got, again, we're back to the FCC. This is what the question looks like. It's the FCC violations during the preceding term. That means if you've had the station for 8 years, that's the past 8 years. If you bought the station in somewhere less than 8 years ago, then you're covering only your period. You're not responsible, just as a general concept, you're not responsible for a prior licensee's actions or inactions. So what we're looking for here, and one of the things that it's sometimes hard to find them, and when we're helping people prepare a renewal application, we actually ask them to search their records and their memories as to whether or not they got a notice of apparent liability, a notice of violation, a notice of forfeiture, in other words, a fine. If any of those come up, you need to report them and describe the circumstances that led to that notice of violation. Now, most of the time, I have to tell you that we report them, and that's the end of it. We don't hear any other problem, especially if it's already been dealt with the FCC, if there was already a notice of apparent liability issued and maybe a consent decree, etc. But you do have to report those items. Kind of a gotcha if you don't get them. So that we'll move on to the next question, which has to do with alien ownership. And this is, for most people, this is a very simple question. If 20% or less of your licensee is owned by foreign nationals, you're good. If you have a situation where there's, when we say indirect ownership, if a separate entity, separate corporation or separate LLC owns part of the licensee and less than 25% is indirectly owned by foreign nationals, you're good. Now, if you're in a situation where that's not the case, where you've got more than those caps blind, then you need to get a hold of your attorney right away, because we got to fix this. It's fixable a number of ways. One, you go back and you basically liquidate or bring someone down, or as Frank has had some experience, you can get, it's a difficult process, but you can get a waiver for foreign ownership.
Yeah, if I could just jump in here real fast, and Matt's right. I mean, foreign ownership is a really complicated topic. We could do a whole webinar, maybe we should sometime, do a whole webinar devoted just to foreign ownership, because there's all of these rules and exceptions of what counts and what doesn't count. And as Matt correctly pointed out, is as complicated as they are, the SEC is now changing as far as liberalizing the waiver process, that sort of thing. If you're not sure, you really talk to your counsel just to make sure that everything is in order. Just a couple of, like, silly, but believe it or not, important points that come along. When the FCC looks at foreign ownership control, they are judging U.S. citizens. Because I've had this question. Well, I'm a resident alien. I've been living in this country for many, many years. I have a green card. I can own a radio station, right? No. I mean, they're looking for a U.S. passport, U.S. citizenship. That's the qualifier here. As I mentioned earlier, other things are counted or are not counted. Trusts get very, very thorny. If you're not certain, definitely check with your counsel on that.
So the next thing we have is the Anti-Drug Abuse Act certification. Most people just blow over this because it rarely comes up, but occasionally it does. And we have to, if someone was denied benefits, expressly denied federal benefits under the 1988 Anti-Drug Abuse Act, we have to disclose that and disclose that information. Again, that applies not only to the licensee, but to any party of the licensee and anybody that, like it mentions here in the slide, officers, directors, partners, members, other principals, or persons with 5% or greater ownership interests, even if those ownership interests are insulated, even if they were, say, a limited partner. Again,
I'm going to throw in another thing here. I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but it
please do.
Kind of makes me laugh on this question. This is one of the most poorly worded questions, and it appears on like every single FCC application there is, whether it's an assignment application, a renewal application, a modification, you're going to see this question on there. It's really poorly written, and assuming for the moment that you don't have any issues with the Anti-Drug Abuse Act, the answer to this question is yes, because a lot of people, well, me? No, I have no problem. So they check no. But this is a situation where you are certifying that you have not been denied benefits. So you actually have to check yes, not no.
That's correct. That's correct. So the next thing we have is the non-discriminatory advertising certification. Now, this only applies to commercial stations. It basically, as you'll see the question there, basically what we're being asked to certify is that we don't discriminate on the basis of race or ethnicity. This came in, I think, about 10 years ago. It was intended to stop discriminatory practices such as advertising agencies saying no urban, no Spanish. Most of the time people don't have any trouble certifying that. They're pretty much happy to get any advertiser that comes their way. You do have to have a reasonable basis for that certification. It usually does not turn out to be a very big issue. So Frank, am I doing this one or are you doing?
No, you'll keep doing it.
I keep playing through. Biennial ownership report certification. Now your biennial ownership report would, as our slide points out, was due January 31st of last year. We've been amazed as we've been going through and helping people with renewals, how many people somehow missed that deadline, even though we put out reminders and told people. Yet one of the things you want to do maybe today after you go is make sure that you filed your biennial ownership report. That was it would have been filed either in late 1999, in December of 1999, or January of 2020. And even if it wasn't filed, take action right away to get it filed. We've heard from the commission, we've heard scuttlebutt that this is going to be the new cause célèbre. That we've heard that Acting Chairman Rosenworcel wants to make sure that these records are accurate, And we may be looking at consent decrees for licensees that have failed to file their ownership reports. Now, this consent decree would probably entail that you'd have to, first of all, you'd have to mess with the consent decree. It would delay the processing of your renewal, and more than likely would involve having a compliance officer appointed, adopting a compliance plan, and going through a reporting process to confirm that you've learned your lesson and you're going to file ownership reports from now on. So I would, I emphasize, make sure your ownership report is there and ready to go. If the next ownership report, by the way, is going to be coming up, it should be due December 1st, 2021. It's not, some of you that have been in the business for a long time know that ownership reports used to be tied to when you filed your renewal or the anniversary of when you had to file your renewal. That's not the case anymore. Everybody files on the same deadline, which is supposed to be December 1st of 2021. It's possible that for the last 2 cycles, it's been postponed. It's possible to be postponed again this year, but it's also possible that it's going to be on that date.
Yeah,
so
if I could just jump in here real fast, I want to go back to a little bit what Matt was talking about the consent decrees. Consent decrees are like the new, it's like the new fad at the FCC. They're dishing out consent decrees left and right during this renewal cycle, and where they've been doing it a lot is with regard to the political file in the online public inspection file. We're going to get to this in a little bit, but where stations have have political files that are somewhat incomplete in the online public inspection file. The FCC in other states, because remember, many other states have already gone through these renewals. It's going across the country from east to west. So we've gotten experience from maybe like 30 other states that have already filed their renewals of what the FCC is doing, so we can sort of predict what they may do with you guys. They have been hitting stations with these consent decrees, these sort of kind of like put you on probation. They impose these compliance programs to make sure that you learn your lesson. They don't fine you, which is good by and large, but they make you sort of submit these reports to show that you've straightened up and you're flying right and you're getting it in order. Well, the newest, of course, is now for ownership reports. They've been doing it for the political files. Now it looks like they're going to be doing it for the ownership reports. So, stay tuned. That's still not official yet, but as Matt said, Rosa Worsel, the acting chairwoman of the FCC, has made comments about imposing that. And if you get one of those, don't panic. We've been through it. A lot of stations have been through it, but do expect.
So our next topic is EEO program certification. Basically, what you see there, and it dictates the way you have to fill out 2 forms. You're going to have, regardless of how many employees you have, you're going to be filing 2 forms. You're going to be filing the renewal form and the EEO form, the form Schedule 396. Even if the EEO form 396 says you have fewer than 5 employees, you're going to be filing. What you're going to have to do, just so it's clear, you're going to have to file the EEO program certification or EEO form first, because one of the things you're going to have to do is take the file number for that form and put it into the renewal form. So that's the way you go. Now, as it says, every station must file. If you have more than 5 full-time, we're going to be talking more about the form Schedule 396 in a minute, but basically if you have 5 or more full-time employees, you're going to have to include the last 2 years of annual EEO public file reports. And those public file, we'll be talking about what those are going to involve, what they will always involve. There's no change in what they are. And we'll also talk briefly, you have to certify that you've in fact posted those annual EEO public file reports on your website. the general topic of posting we'll cover later, but there's gets to be more and more things that the FCC wants to put on your website, and the EEO annual public file report is one of them. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Frank for another chunk of the form.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So the next question, as you see here, and we get, as with all of them, we're giving you a little screenshot of the question, is about the online public file. Now, there are actually two questions dealing with the online public file. One is, whether all the documents that are supposed to be in the file are there, and the second part of it is whether they were placed there in a timely fashion. The sneaky thing about online public files is that they timestamp everything. So, so if you put something in a little late, there's you can't hide it. The FCC knows it was there placed late. Now, look, I want to pause for a second on the online public file, because the preparation of the online public file is a major part of the renewal process now. There's no getting away from it. And so now is the time for you to, familiarize yourself with the requirements of the public file rule. And by the way, we have on the YouTube page, we have like a 90-minute video on the public file and everything that needs to go into the public file. Probably a good idea to have a committed staffer whose job it is to maintain that public file and get all the material that's in there that needs to be in there. And that staffer, probably is going to be the contact person on the public file. So, really, now's an important time to start going through the big weak links on the public file have been quarterly issues programs list. Oh my God. I mean, we've seen it all. I've seen, stations in other states come up and they've got nothing for quarterly issues programs list for the past 8 years, because you have to have the material in the file from either when you purchased the station using a long form, or since the last renewal, which was 8 years ago. So there are stations, racing around trying to recreate 8 years worth of quarterly issues programs list. That's 4 per year for 8 years. And remember, those have to be in. There are deadlines by which those have to be in, right? So, January, February, March has to be in by April 10th. April, May, June has to be in by July 10th. July, August, September has to be in by October. So if they're in, so even if you recreate it, they are going to be late. So you need to start getting that pulled together now.
Let me, just jump in for 1 second, Frank. That on the if you can't fix if it's late, it's late. If it didn't get done, it didn't get done. But if you can recreate it, even if it's literally years late, it's important to get it in now, as before your renewal is filed. Where we find that, generally speaking, although we're going to be talking about some of the fines that have come down, but generally speaking, on the radio side, if you've got everything in, even if it's been late, and you say something like, we're going to pay more attention in the future, or we are paying attention and we will get this done, they've let people slide. Where people have gotten in trouble is where there's no reports there, or there's very few reports there, and they haven't really made any effort to reconstruct those reports. Those can wind up with some pretty significant adverse consequences. Handing it back to you, Frank.
And Matt's right. When some of you did these renewals 8 years ago, before radio at least had public files, when we got to these questions, they would just check yes, yes. And there was no way to verify. It was very rare that the FCC sent anybody to the studio to actually look at your paper public file. And so, they had to take it on face value. Now, if they found out you were lying, you'd really get in trouble. But it was very difficult to verify. Now everything is verifiable. Everything is verifiable. So, you have to make sure that things are. Again, for radio, as mentioned here, radio had their public files. That the last batch of state radio stations that they had their public files online was back in March of 2018. With television, the television stations are probably sitting in the audience chuckling and smiling because they went through this 8 years ago. For them, a big headache was the children's TV reports, where they got a lot of hassle with the children's TV reports. For radio, and for TV, it's tending to be more the quarterly issues programs list and the political files. As I mentioned before, the FCC is doling out consent decrees on these. But again, as Matt pointed out, by and large, if you enter into the consent decrees, they are granting the renewals. They're not giving you a fine, and they're just imposing on you for about a year an obligation to put into place a compliance program, adopt a compliance manual, and then submit reports in, which is actually getting off pretty easy compared to what the alternative could be. But again, the political file is also something that you have to keep an eye on. And again, even though I know I'm sounding like a commercial here, we have a webinar online on the political broadcasting rules as well, and that does a deep dive into not only like lowest unit rate, but also a whole section on what has to go into the public file for political. So now's a good time to reacquaint yourself with that as well. With missing issues programs lists, they've been an issue with renewals. Although with the political file, we've been seeing the consent decrees. The FCC has been doling out some fines for online public file violations. So I think with the renewal cycles, they're cutting some slack, but the potential is for some significant fines, and there has been some precedent for some significant fines there. We've got some of the dollar figures up there. So now's the time to do it. Recreating those files will certainly help in terms of your question, but may not get you off the hook as far as a forfeiture. But a voluntary disclosure is way better than trying to get through it on the sly. And because if the FCC can verify, basically just assume that this is a situation where the FCC is asking you a question that they already know the answer to. So really all they're doing is testing to see whether or not you answer honestly. Okay, minimum operating schedules. The FCC, this is for radio only, will be asking questions about whether the station has been on the air for the full term, and if it has not been on the air for the full term, what are those what those periods are. You have to certify for any periods of more than 30 days when the station was either not operating or silent, or was operating for fewer than the required minimum operating hours, which is basically about 2/3 of the time. I think it's like from 2/3 of the time from the morning until midnight. The days that the station was off the air or reduced hours. And oh, by the way, if you look at the minimum operating hours is if you have any desire to look it up, it's section 1740 of the FCC's broadcasting rules. Having test patterns and the like is not good enough. So you have to have some kind of real programming on there for it to count for not being, off the air. Knowing how often the station was off the air is a substantive part of the review process, because the FCC looks, among other things, as to whether or not the station or broadcast facility is serving the interests of the public. Yeah, you guys are your first responders. You are you're sort of guardians of the public airwaves, and you have, as part of your mandate, an obligation to serve the public. So, the logic there, of course, is that if you're not broadcasting, you're not serving the public very much. So that's the issue there. Although you don't have to justify if your station was off the air for periods of time, if you do have good reasons, and God knows these day and age, between fires on the West Coast, hurricanes on the East Coast, a pandemic, earthquakes. I mean, there's so much going on that I've been working with a lot of stations down in Florida, Puerto Rico, and the Gulf Coast, who are just getting hammered by hurricanes and floods. A lot of those stations are off the air, and they're off the air for extended periods of time. So if you have good reason, don't be shy. Speak up and let them know. Discontinued operational status. Now, this is really important. Many of you should already know this. This should be emblazoned in your mind, but not, a station, broadcast station, cannot, if it is silent for a consecutive 12-month period, its license is in severe jeopardy, absent some kind of a tolling or special permission from the FCC. In the case of, I was talking about the broadcast stations down in Puerto Rico that got, devastated by Hurricane Maria. A lot of those were off the air for more than a year, and they did get special permission from the FCC. But you have to just keep in mind that when the stations were off the air, and if your station currently is off the air, it should be off the air with a special temporary authority, and you should be closely monitoring that 1-year anniversary date. But know that if your station is off the air and does not go back on the air by the time you file your renewal, by and large, the FCC is not going to be granting renewals while the station is dark. So it's something that you should focus on and consider very carefully. I should also mention, as an aside, is that another consequence of the renewal cycle is that while the renewal is pending, the FCC will not grant applications for long-form assignments of those stations. So if you're thinking of buying or selling a station in any one of your states, you need to try to get it, approved by the FCC and consummated and closed by the October 1 deadline, because once you file the renewal, the FCC will not grant an assignment or a transfer, a long form. And if it is granted, if you haven't closed yet, they won't let you close until the renewal is granted. And as we know, that may not happen until February. So if you have transactions that are in the pipeline, keep in mind, if your transaction is for a station that's in another state, with possibly a different renewal deadline, look up what that renewal deadline is, because it may impact the timing of the transaction.
Just today, I'll throw in today, just today, in fact, immediately before we started this webinar, I represented a client and we closed on the sale of the station because the renewal is coming on, the renewal deadline for that particular station will be this coming Tuesday.
Right.
So we had to get it done. We had to think about this. It would get the application for assignment on file about 2 months ago. We had to kind of beg and, you know, please, won't you grant this so we can get this closed before the renewal deadline. So if you're thinking about a transaction that you want to do before the renewal comes up, there's no time like the present. You want to get moving forward on it.
That's exactly right. So the June 1 deadline that Matt was referring to is, I think that June 1 is like New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Arizona. There's a few.
Idaho. Yeah.
Idaho, that's right. That's there. I see that there are some questions in here, but let me get through the RF certification section, and then before I turn it over to Matt, we'll see if we can take one question before, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end as well. So the RF certification, is basically, that you are just certifying that there's been no material change in the RF environment for the station or surrounding since the most recent license renewal, and if there has been a change, and you have to go through the worksheets to determine RF compliance. Now, this is one of these questions that makes everybody like cross-eyed and what, but we have done a nifty little flow chart. This is for all of you out there, this is a screenshot moment. But again, it'll be, the webinar won't be online. But just to kind of walk you through it real fast. So again, you're gonna first determine, has there been a material change since the last granted license, like a license to cover, or since the last renewal? If the answer is no, then you can certify yes, you're done with this question. But if the answer is yes, if there has been a material change, then you move on. Whether can you demonstrate using the worksheets and the 303S, there are worksheets online that you can pull up. Can you certify compliance that way? Those worksheets you may be able to do, but you may need your engineer to help you going through them. Again, if the answer is yes, check yes. Otherwise, you move on to the next box. Can you demonstrate compliance through an engineering study? Now, this definitely is going to require your engineer. And if, again, answer is yes, then you check yes on the box. Otherwise, if the answer is no, you may need to modify your facility or make some appropriate changes to reduce the amount of the adverse RF consequences, and then start the process all over again until you are in compliance and that you can check yes. So I'll leave this up for just a minute more, or say 10 seconds more, in case you want to get your screenshots. All right.
Okay, Frank, do you want to take these questions now?
Yeah,
or do you
let me take. Let me see what. Let's see. Is RF compliance about long-term or regular operation? For example, we were on reduced power for a week while our our transmitter was being worked on, I would say that if you have a temporary, a change, which is, and you had like an STA while you were doing repairs or the like, and that is no longer the case, then I think that should not. Then I think you can certify yes on a question like that, don't you think, Matt?
Yeah, I do. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they're looking for example, in this situation, is one where, I don't know, like maybe another tower has gone up around you, or there's been some, change around to your signal, or a new office building has gone up, or there's been you've changed your facilities in such a way that there is sort of a permanent change. I mean, if you're just operating at variance temporarily during the course, I don't know that would I don't think that would apply. Let me see if there's one more here. Because you brought up the topic, what is the current timeline for station transactions? We filed in December of 2020. We filed in December of 2020, and I'm still waiting for the commission to rule. Are you seeing long wait times from the commission? I assume when you talk about the current time for station transactions, you're talking about an assignment or transfer of the station. And I will say that by and large, assignment applications are running way slower, due in no small part due to the pandemic, a variety of different things, than they used to. They're just taking a lot longer. We used to guess 6 to 8 weeks. Now, I'm probably, telling people not to be prepared to wait maybe say 3 months just for an initial grant. If you have been waiting since December of 2020, and the application probably is off public notice by now, you should probably have somebody call over to the FCC to find out what the delay is. Obviously, if a petition was filed, that's going to delay it. But if there's no petition, you may want to find out, because sometimes these applications, they get lost, or they end up on the bottom of an inbox. So all you need to do is nudge them a little bit. And by and large, I have found that if you're looking at a renewal deadline, like if a renewal is coming up and you need to be able to close on the transaction before the renewal, kind of what the scenario that Matt just described, the FCC is very good at trying to accommodate those timelines. I had one myself just recently, and they really went out of their way to put an assignment grant on a fast burner, precisely also so we can make that June 1 deadline. So we'll take some more questions at the end, but for now,
we got one more here that I see that came up,
okay.
and the question is, do radio public files need to be up to date just since March 1, 2018? No, they need to be up to date all the way back to the earlier of whether when you bought the station or 8 years ago.
Yeah, so if you bought the station on a long form, 5 years ago, you go back 5 years. If you have owned the station since the last renewal, you need to have all 8 years. If you're a situation like Matt just described, where you bought the station this week, well, guess what? If you're filing the renewal on Tuesday, you have to make sure that you're up to date for a week.
Yeah, but just so it's clear, let's say you've had the station for 8 years, you've got to take those old quarterly issues programs lists, scan them, and put them on the online public inspection file.
That's important to know, because I've had that come up. A lot of people say, well, I don't have to worry about the old paper stuff 2018, right? Because that's just the old paper stuff. All they care about is the online stuff since 2018. No. When the conversion to the online public file happened back in 2018, the FCC was very clear about needing to scan all the old paper files and getting them into the online file. So yeah.
So let me hit one more, well, maybe a couple more, and then we'll get to the Form 396 or the Schedule 396. So the question is if you've had some issues programs lists that were late filed, should you answer the question no? Were they on the public inspection file consideration certification? That's correct. You should answer no, and then add an exhibit that says specifically what happened. When we do them, we say, let's say first quarter of 2020 was late by 4 days, and we go down to that amount of detail. Now, some people don't go to that amount of detail, and they seem to be going all right. But you should, if something was late, report in an exhibit, check the boxes no, and report in an exhibit that it was late.
You can say that your file is complete.
Right.
That's accurate.
Right.
But it is not timely. So two different questions, two different issues. It can be complete, but if you recreated the last 8 years the week before you filed, then it's obviously not timely. Now the good news, and again, we have done an entire webinar on public file, but a lot of the stuff that's in the public file gets uploaded automatically by the FCC. All the applications that you file, modifications, those sort of things, those, great news, they get uploaded automatically. So really the big trip ups for the stations are those parts of the public file that require you to prepare the document, you to scan it and upload it. That's where, and what falls into those categories, quarterly issues and political. Those are the two biggest problems. Because the other stuff, they used to have to photocopy the ownership reports and put them in the file. You used to have to photocopy your modification application or license to cover application. You don't have to do that anymore because the FCC does it for you. So it's really the quarterly issues programs list and the political file.
So let me catch one more thing before, because it's sparked by one of the questions, how far do we have to go back? I've already talked about the issues programs list. Political file is 2 years. You only have to go back 2 years. And I'm going to be candid. If you've got in your online political file more than 2 years, take it down. You're not required to have it there longer than 2 years. And I don't see any reason to leave it up. And unless you're already subject to some sort of consent decree or investigation, then that's different. But if you haven't gotten any whistle from the FCC, if it's in the political file, if it's older than 2 years, you can take it down.
Hey, let me mention one thing. I'm glad that Matt, it was a good question. I'm glad Matt brought it up about the political file as well. A couple of things about the political file. One is that I have seen some confusion where broadcasters will think that the political file gets uploaded on a quarterly basis, kind of like the quarterly issues programs list goes on a quarterly basis. Not true. The political file, those summaries of the contacts you've had with the candidates or the sales that you've made to candidates, that has to be done on a rolling basis, ongoing. So like within 24 hours of being contacted by that candidate, you should be uploading that stuff. You do not do it once every quarter like you do with quarterly issues programs. That's the first thing. The second thing is, now I know you guys are way off down, but we're just hearing this now from Colorado, from other states that had their renewals earlier this year. Expect political consent decrees. You're going to get them. Everybody has. Don't freak out when they come in. Don't think, oh my God, it's when you actually go through it, it's really not that bad, and it gets your renewal granted, and without a fine, and all you have to do is submit the report. So now's a good time to set expectations. Chances are, even if you have it complete, but you may get it. So again, don't panic. You're not the first one, you won't be the last.
So there's one last question, and I'll handle it quickly. It's the online public inspection file system at the commission has been anything less. It's been far less than reliable. It's been down any number of times. And sometimes, as one of the questioner asked, well, what happens if I tried to upload it on time and the file was there? And the questioner said, we noted it on the item. That's the right thing to do. Note that attempted to upload on whatever date you attempted to upload, and then it'll tell you, the system will show when it is uploaded. If you attempted to upload everything on time and you've noted that in your public file, you can check the box. Yes, we have, it is complete and it was timely.
That's right.
The commission staff recognizes that there's been problems with the OPIF, but yeah, you'll be good there. So let me go on. We're a little after our time, 3:06, and we've got about another 25 minutes to answer some of your questions and wrap up our presentation. So let me move into the Form 396. As I mentioned, every broadcaster is going to have to do the 396 regardless of what size of their staff, even if I have some people that have no staff. Hard to believe, but they do. As multi-state units, if for instance, let's say you had an Oregon, Idaho employment unit, and I'll explain what an employment unit is in a minute. You go with the earlier state. So for instance, in that instance, it would be you would file with Idaho. If you had an Oregon, California employment unit where your employment unit boarded the state, you would go with California, which will come up on August 1 is the deadline. Now, what's an employment unit? An employment unit is a group of stations that are commonly owned in the same market, and the licensee is given some discretion in defining what the market is, and share at least one employee. So that's what an employment unit is. Sometimes we have employment units where there's multiple licensees, but they actually are under common control. I've had situations where two commonly controlled licensees were in the same market, but they didn't share any employees. So they wound up to be two separate employment units. But most of the time, if you're under common control in the same market and you share at least one employee, that's an employment unit, and you report the entire unit together. Now, as we pointed out, if you've got an employment unit that includes both radio and TV, you have to file in both years, both with the radio report and then a year later with the television report. So in preparing the form, it's a relatively simple form, especially if you have fewer than 5 employees. If you have fewer than 5 full-time employees, by the way, for FCC purposes, full-time is 30 or more hours on a regularly scheduled basis. Somebody doesn't become full-time because they just did a little overtime work or because they're vacation replacement. If you're regularly scheduled 30 or more hours a week, they're considered full-time for the FCC purposes. An owner of the station is not considered an employee if that person has at least 20% of the ownership. So what you have to put into the report is, are you above or below the 5 employee threshold? If you're below, the only other question you have to ask is whether you've had any discrimination complaints during the license term, and you disclose what those are. If you're 5 or more, you need to put the last 2 annual EEO public file reports in the application. I can tell you they are watching for it because we filed one and we forgot to upload the second one, and we got a call from the commission saying upload that second one, and sure enough Once we did, we were granted within about 2 days. Besides the EEO public inspection or annual public file report, you also need a narrative statement, which basically says in about a paragraph, doesn't have to be terribly long, that you're paying attention to EEO issues, that you're seeking a diverse body of applicants when you have openings. When you look at the form, there's a little bit of information there that'll help you in putting together the narrative statement. It doesn't have to be long, but it does have to be there. Then when you're disclosing the EEO discrimination complaint, you see right here the language that's there. You have to, sometimes people say, well, I shouldn't have to disclose this. This is a private matter, especially if it's been settled. You still have to disclose it. And you should name, as it says, the name of the person, the agency, the file number, basis for the complaint, and its resolution. Now, occasionally, you can run into a kind of a problem where you had a complaint and you signed an NDA. And what you're going to do there, that's one where you probably need to talk to your communications attorney about, and your EEO attorney about whether you can disclose that. I will say that if you ever get into that sort of matter, if you get into a settlement and they're talking about an NDA, you really want to have a carve out to make sure that you can report information regarding the case as required by law. And this is one of the reasons that it's required by law. You'll see a sample disclosure statement here. Doesn't have to be long. Doesn't have to, you're not making a case here. You're just reporting the facts. And I have to tell you, I've had very, very few occasions where the commission has come back and asked for more information. If you disclosed this sort of name, rank, and serial number in some ways, you're going to be fine. So, like I said, you do also have to include the annual EEO public file report, where for the last 2 years, one of the things you need to make sure you include in those reports are your outreach. It's called prong 3, and shows what you've been doing. If you have 10 or more, we have 11 or more full-time employees and are in a metro market with more than 250,000 people, you have to have 4 points, so to speak, every 2 years. If you're in a small market or have a small staff, you have to have 2 points. Again, if you miss in 1 year, hopefully you picked it up in the other year. The FCC has a list in the rule itself, of 16 different categories of outreach activities. And most people just look at job fairs, but there's many things besides job fairs. There's mentoring programs, there's tutorship, management development programs, a lot of different things that are in those rules that can count as one of those points for your outreach program. So we're moving on to what happens. You filed the application, you're away, it's on its way. You got one more piece of paperwork to take care of. Well, it's maybe more than one. You have to do a post-filing public notice. And there's been a big change in the rules on how public notices are done. You no longer, newspapers are out almost for all public notice. I think for all public notices, newspaper publications not becoming required. What we're going to talk about though is what's specifically required for full power station renewal. You don't have to publish anything in the newspaper. For a full power station, you don't have to put anything in your public inspection file or on your website. What you do have to do is broadcast a notice 6 times, total of 6 times over in the 4 weeks after your application is accepted for filing. The FCC releases a public notice of acceptance for filing. Barring some complication like your fee didn't go through or something like that, you get the notice of acceptance for filing of your renewal application about 2 days after the application's been filed, maybe 3, but normally 2 business days. So once that has occurred, you can start doing your public notices. You're supposed to do it not less than once a week for 4 weeks. And you have to have at least 2 of those weeks, you need to have 2 notices. So during those weeks where you have 2 notices, the notices can't be on the same day. So they want to spread it out so it's a broad audience that hears the notice. The notices must be Monday through Friday, no weekend notices, between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. The FCC in their rules has a specific script that you need to follow. It's fairly short. It's about 15 seconds. If you want more information about us, send us your email. We'll send you our memo that outlines what these requirements are.
Right, and we can get that script also to the state associations. I think most of them have it already, but if they don't, you guys just reach out to us. We'll make sure that you have it so you can get it out to your members as well.
So after the notices have been aired the last time, then you need to basically do a proof of performance like you would do for an advertiser, or you can make up your own form, but it basically shows what the script, the text of the announcement that ran and the days and times that it ran. And you need to put that in the public inspection file, again, within 7 days of the last airing. Now, if you also are filing for an FM translator, slightly different thing. You have to do with that, you have to do a notice. Again, the text is provided in the FCC's rules. You have to put a notice online, and you have to do it it gets a little complicated, but let me go. Basically, if the station has a website, whether it's the primary station or otherwise, you put it there. If the station doesn't have a website, but the station group does, you put it there. And if the station group doesn't have a website, but the licensee does, you put it there. And what there needs to be is there needs to be a link on the first page that says FCC applications. And you hit that link and you should go to the public notice. Everybody's supposed to have that link, by the way. That's new in the rules. You have to have a link that says FCC applications. And indeed, if there's no application pending, when you click on that link, it's supposed to say something to the effect of no applications pending and the date that it was last updated. If you don't, there is an option to upload these messages to a publicly available website. But I'll be honest with you, one, it's kind of hard to find those kind of community-oriented websites because they're supposed to be focused on the community where the station is. And we advise people, it's just simpler to, if you don't have a website, set up a simple one, if nothing else, for FCC purposes. One of our guys used to do it for about, he could get it done in an hour, and for and the cost of getting an inexpensive domain name was usually not very much. So if you haven't got a website, you probably are going to need one for FCC purposes. So we're moving on to the kind of a summary. Once you filed your application, assuming you filed your application on time, the petition to deny deadline will be January 2nd of 2022. Anyone that wants to can file a petition to deny. They're not common. We don't see, I think I've seen like 2 since in this renewal cycle. Actually, I've seen some against translators for kind of unusual reasons. I've seen some informal objections for kind of hyper technical reasons on translators, but there is always the possibility that someone will file a petition to deny. As we said, the license expires on February 1 of 2022. Assuming the FCC sticks with what they've done in the past, you can expect grants to come out in Oregon probably the 3rd week of Oregon, Washington, Alaska, and Hawaii. You can expect them to come out about the 3rd week of January. And they usually come out all on, the ones that don't have problems all come out on one day. If a couple of days goes by and everybody else has gotten their renewal and you haven't gotten their renewal, then there's something that's hanging it up. And it may not be a big thing, it may be a very little thing, but you need to check in what the problem is. The audio division staff, at least, has been very cooperative about telling us what the problem is. Now, if they say the problem is Enforcement Bureau, the Enforcement Bureau they're much more closed-mouthed about why your application is hung up. So those are you can, when the time comes, and if you don't have a grant, it's time you can start asking some questions. Now, while your application is pending, you still have the obligation to update it if there's been any significant changes. Whether that's like the mention a felony conviction or a character allegation or something like that. I also have to say, if you have violations of your online public inspection file that occurred after you filed a renewal, strictly speaking, you're supposed to report that. I won't say strictly speaking, you are supposed to report that, and they will take it into consideration. So just look at our kind of tips to as you're getting into it on our next slide. Review the online public inspection file, especially your political file. On your political file, when you get an order or an inquiry, not just you don't have to put anything up if somebody just asks what the rates are. But if you get a buy, you need to make sure you upload that material within 1 business day. You want to make sure you've updated your address with the FCC, particularly your email address, because more and more things are coming to email addresses, and they're not going to be very sympathetic if you say, oh, that the person whose email address was listed is no longer with the station. You do need to make sure that those are there. You want to look at your EEO report, discrimination complaints, and the one that you want to talk about, an RF study if you've had something happen that's occurred in the vicinity of your facility that might have changed your RF status. By the way, to follow up very quickly on the RF, you can rely, I am told by the commission staff, you can rely on RF studies that were done by someone who was nearby you. Say the last person to come on in your vicinity and said, I've done an RF study and we're all clear here. If they are in close proximity to you, that's telling you that your RF is going to be fine too. What you really have to watch for on RF is if there's something that's occurred that was not previously reviewed by the FCC. On one occasion, I had a client that had a station on a campus. It was a college station. And sure enough, they built a dorm next to the tower. And that was not subject to FCC review. And so we did have to go in and do a full-blown RF study after that, and had to do actually quite a bit of mitigation to stay within compliance. So we are at the end of our presentation. We've got a few minutes more for questions and answers.
And if I could just jump in here real fast, just to wrap up. I mean, and I know we're sounding like a broken record here, but I cannot overstate the importance of what we've said about the public file. I mean, really now is the time. Don't wait. Now is the time to take a look at that public file. Familiarize yourself with what's supposed to be in there. Do an audit of whether it's complete or whether it's lacking. Get somebody on your staff to be in charge of it. Please make liberal use of our webinars on YouTube. The blog has a ton of information. On YouTube, we have renewal and public file webinars that are even in Spanish. So for Spanish stations out there, we have that as well. So now's a good time to really familiarize yourself, because it always ends up being more time consuming than you think it's going to be.
So Frank, one of the questions.
Any questions there?
Well, we got a question here. It says regarding pre and post filing. Well, actually, let me first, that gives you a chance on that. There are no more pre-filing announcements.
Right.
Let me mention that. That was when they changed the public file rule, they did us the favor of getting rid of pre-filing announcements. For those of you who have been around this game for a while, it used to be we'd have to start, we would already have been in, no, let's see, it's 2 months before the renewal was filed, we'd have to start pre-filing announcements. Those are gone.
Started in
We just
July.
have,
or
we just have post-filing announcements. The question is, and I'm going to actually, hopefully Frank knows this because I would have to look it up. Our FM stations with HD supplemental channels, are the notices required on all the channels?
You
And
don't have to. You don't have to do it on every single one of the channels. Just
Okay.
if you just do it on main channel, that's fine.
okay, great. I'm glad that Frank knew that because I would have had to have looked it up. So if we have any other questions?
Well, hearing none, I should have said, make sure this isn't mine. A big, huge, oh, thank you. I'm just reading here. Big, huge thank you to Frank and Matt for bringing this timely webinar. I want to say it has been a pleasure, doing this. We want to make ourselves, absolutely available to all the broadcasters in your states and the 4 associations. Again, I can't say enough how much we've enjoyed working with you guys. I want to, again, give my thanks to Kathy Hebert, who was just, phenomenal, to Jamie Hartnett, Keith Shipman, and Bob Singer at the 4 state associations. Again, those associations do a fabulous job. I can't say enough. If you're not a member, it's not just the webinars. It's the inspection services, just a variety of different things that they do, to say nothing of all the work they do in Washington. It is your dues goes to help broadcasting in your state. It has been a pleasure to do this. Matt, do you have any closing words?
Well, I do, because there's one more question about, the question is, when should we ask to repeat when stations should hear about their renewals? And it's about the 3rd week of January. And if you haven't gotten anything by, say, the 1st of February, it's time to ask a question or two. Check with your attorney. If you don't have the attorney, you always can call us, or you can check with the audio division, and they will let you know. Specifically, Nazifa Sawaz is the person that would tell you what the status is of your renewal application. So let me see if there's anything else. At least for me, the box with the questions on it is a little hard to manipulate. So, all right, I think we're
good.
I think we're good.
All right. Well, listen, I want to wish everybody a great rest of the day, a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. Aloha to those of you, or mahalo in Hawaii, and stay tuned for our next webinar. We hope to be doing more over the summer. All my best, and take care. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.